All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our last office hours. Andy is the press box at Fenway Park, so
yeah, you can see behind me
maybe
here.
a little bit less talking today.
So today we're going to cover some encouragement to finish up, and then also discussion about the final. And Ethan and Eric are going to outline what that is and what that looks like.
All right, thanks, Andy. So first, so if anybody's watching this, you have until September 14th to complete all coursework that is not the final. So on September 14th, the coursework will close all lecture questions, problem sets. So you still have about 5 days from when this is being recorded and posted in the course to finish all that material. The final will go out in 2 days, a week to complete that. I'll let Ethan talk more about the format of that in a second, but that's the general outline. All coursework is due by the 14th, and the final is due on the 18th. Ethan?
So the way the final is laid out, there's 4 parts to it, just like the 4 tracks. We have history, tech, statistics, and sabermetrics. So we have a few questions from each of those sections. So the history track, it's pretty straightforward. Just make sure that you know who we talked about and what their major contributions are. Not going to be anything, specific dates or anything, but just understand who they are, what they did, why you want to know them. So then the tech part is going to be a little more in depth, as you probably guessed. So there's going to be some SQL on there, and as well as R. SQL. So the way the final is laid out, there's 4 parts to it, just like the 4 track. So for the tech part, so for SQL, it starts with just some simple queries from the beginning, and eventually goes on to joins and subqueries. So make sure, if you had some trouble with SQL, you might want to go and review joins and subqueries. That's going to be on there. As far as R, it's going to be pretty similar to some of the assessments we've done, different functions. It's not going to be anything that we haven't covered. I think the R part is relatively straightforward.
Let's remind people about the discussion forum piece.
Yeah.
For the final.
So for the final exam, we will not be having people post questions to the discussion forum as you've been doing for the class, because the final exam is more of an individual effort, and we don't want answers being translated basically through there, or us having to answer a question for one person that gives the answer to everybody. So instead, for any questions that anybody has in the final, we'll write this up in the discussion forum and in the email to go out this Friday, but you're going to want to email us instead at Sabr, Sabr101x 2015 at gmail.com. So you're basically just going to, any questions you have on the final, you're going to email that account instead of posting in the discussion forum. And so Ethan and Andy and I are going to be the ones helping you out more so than other students, just because the final exam is slightly more individual than the rest of the course. You can still post in the discussion forum about baseball, I suppose, but not about stuff pertaining to the final exam while that final exam is live.
I think that's fair, and there's a lot of ways to succeed in this course, and if you have trouble with the final, know that there's help, but we just don't want it to keep it up as part of the discussion forum.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely, if you're struggling with something, send us an email at that address, and the email that's going to be sent out. Don't hesitate to email us there. You'll get help that way, just not in the discussion forum.
And in a very similar way, if we see a trend where there's a lot of similar questions, we'll address it in the discussion forum. We think that's completely fair. It's like the final has an extra hint that's needed, or a problem that how it's written. we'll have updates in the discussion forum about more logistical stuff that's problematic, but individual questions should come to the email address.
And if I could give one hint on the discussion on the final exam, is that questions that throughout the course you may have had 2 or 3 chances on, the final exam, you're probably only going to have one or two. So you have to be a little more, look at it a little more closely, think about your answer a little bit more before submitting. Not everybody's going to get 100 in the final. The goal is not to make it incredibly hard, but it is supposed to be challenging and cover the topics that we covered in the course. But most multiple choice questions, you'll have one submission on. Checkboxes, you might have two. But just be a little more careful than you might have been throughout the course because of fewer submission tries.
Yeah, especially for SQL. You do have, I believe we're going to do 3 or 4 chances for SQL problems, which is a little more than some of the other problems, but less than you could have gotten throughout the course. Obviously, you can always work in the ungraded sandbox, so we'll recommend work through your query, submit it, and if there's anything you need to fix, you can work from there.
Yeah, highly recommended. Everything ungraded sandbox or running code in your own RStudio until you're pretty sure you like your answer.
All right, anything else we need to say about the final exam?
Whatever
we forgot to say, or if you missed something right now, it'll be in the email, it'll be in the discussion forum. There'll be a couple posts that explain exactly how to do the final exam.
Good, good.
All right, so we can get some questions.
Go to the questions, yeah.
Eric, do you have anything you want to start with?
I'm opening them right now.
Talk about the twins.
The twins. Okay, I was looking at this today. I saw that question. So wait, what?
Yeah, let's start with the twins.
Viking fan JP.
Yeah.
So it says, do you guys think the Twins have a very good chance of making the playoffs? Miguel Sano seems too good to be denied. Agreed. And our outfield is getting their act together. And when do you think Sabr101 will be coming out? So 201, Andy would know more about that, but release date not set yet. You'll get an email, though. Don't worry about that. Everybody that's taking this class, you'll be alerted when Sabr201 is scheduled. As for the Twins, it's not great for the Twins. They're much, much, much better than anybody thought they were going to be. Sano looks great. I still think Buxton is going to be a good player. But they're a few games back, and their underlying statistics, their run differential, really don't suggest that they should be playing any better than they are. In fact, it says that they should probably be a lot worse. So the Twins are unlikely to make the playoffs. I think Fangraphs has them about 10%. Baseball Prospectus a little lower than that. So it doesn't look great for the Twins to make the playoffs. Their future definitely looks better than it did 6 months ago. But I'd say be happy with Sano, be happy with Buxton, and be happy that Target Field is a beautiful stadium compared to the Metrodome. But I don't think this is going to be the Twins' year. So I think that they're going to come up a little bit short. The Rangers are hot. The Astros aren't going to fall off that much. That's the way I see it. Ethan?
Yeah, I think that transitions well into a question somebody else had, which was about Fangraphs a little bit. If I can make this work, I'm going to share my screen and we can go through, take a look at some of the Fangraph stuff, including playoff odds.
Yeah.
Nice.
Is it,
yeah.
Is it shared?
Yeah, it's shared.
Yeah.
But on the video cast, it's still the face built for radio. Mine.
Are we good?
Yeah.
All
Ethan,
right.
Ethan, make sure. Yeah. That's good.
All right. So
It actually.
Fangraphs homepage. You guys should go here a lot. It's a great site. They have great articles. Maybe you already do. There's a lot of stuff that maybe you wouldn't necessarily know about or takes a while to dig into. So one thing they have that you're going to want to look at a lot in season probably is the playoff odds. If you go to standings here on the top bar, you can look at 2015 playoff odds. So what these are doing, we'll talk a little bit more about projections in Sabr201 for sure. That wasn't something we got to cover here. But it's taking projections for every player, which is really the best way to look at what a player's expected performance is going forward, is to use a rigorous projection system and not try and use 2015 statistics, which are obviously the most important, but past years are also very important, and projection systems kind of take all this information into account to do the best job that they can of projecting future performance. So they take projections combined with depth charts for playing time that are set by people. So manually proportioning out playing time as best as they can, and that gets updated throughout the season as injuries happen and things like that. So you'll see, here you can look at this is just playoff odds percentage here. This is the odds of making the divisional series. So you'll see the AL East. Fangraphs likes the Blue Jays a lot. They think they have a true talent 546 winning percentage rest of season, a little higher than the Yankees. And then just, it's the last month of the season, that 1.5 game lead makes a big difference. So they have about 70-30 favorites over the Yankees. And if you go over to the AL Central, like we were talking about, obviously Royals are going to take that division. But the Twins here, Fangraphs only thinks they're a 454 true talent team rest of the season. Now, you can argue maybe a little bit with that, but if you looked at their underlying statistics, like we said, run differential and base runs, which is kind of a similar thing, it shows that they haven't really played quite as well as their record this year. And the players on their team don't have as good of a track record as their record this year would suggest. And, like I said, a few games back of the Rangers now. They have them at a 14% chance of making the playoffs. So you never know. Fangraphs could be wrong. Maybe they're better than this. And even 14% is not nothing. But I think it's not looking great for the Twins. You guys can go and play around here on the playoff odds. Yeah, the NL Central is really good. Really good teams there. Okay,
well,
so what are some other things?
Talk about how the National League is pretty much set. The 5 teams.
National League, like you can see here, NL East, Nats are pretty much out of it at this point. 6 games back is just a big deficit to overcome. It's interesting that the Fangraphs really likes the Nationals. I think a lot of that is because they still think they're a pretty good team, and they have a pretty weak schedule the rest of the way. So I think they're going to win over 60% of their games, which is, I think, the highest winning percentage the rest of the season of any team. But they're already 6 games back in September, so they're pretty much out of it at this point. You never know, but it would take a pretty historic collapse.
Talk about the peak playoff odds column and how it really, the only, that looks like the 5 teams are set in the National League. But
yeah, so it looks like so basically the 5 teams are going to be basically whoever wins the NL East, which is almost certainly the Mets, and then the Cardinals and the NL Central, 100% chance of making the playoffs, and almost definitely it's going to be the division, which is 91% here. The 2 wildcard teams are going to be the other 2 teams from the Central, probably the Pirates and the Cubs, and then the Dodgers, almost 100% chance of winning their division. So it's almost, I think that's probably pretty unusual, I would guess, that with a few weeks to go, the NL is almost entirely set. Usually you'll see something like the AL where mostly it's set, but the Angels are still in it, the Twins are still in it, the Rangers aren't 100%. There's still some interesting races going on in the AL. I think that's a little more typical. So what else should I talk about in Fangraphs?
I would just go to the leaders board, and just show basically like the pitcher.
Yeah, there's a lot you can dig into on here. So the basic thing is you just go to the leaders section, just batting or pitching. Let's just say we're going to go to batting for 2015. So up at the top here, you can go player stats by individual players. You can go by teams, or you can go by the entire league, which just groups everyone together. I mean, this is just basically a front end for a SQL query if you want to think about it that way. This is going to be, group it together by teams or group it together by putting everyone together, depending on who you're looking at. You look at batting stats, pitching stats, fielding stats. You can choose a position you want to look at. You can choose AL or NL you want to look at, specific teams. Just look at the active roster. There's a lot of tools for choosing seasons. If you want to look at, say, a 10-year window, you could go 2006, 2015, and that'll give you stats for everyone together. So Miguel Cabrera has the highest WAR over the past 10 years for batters. That's the default sort, is by WAR. Pujols, Utley. So these are your top players for the last 10 years. If you want to look at individual seasons, you press this split seasons button. That's a good thing to look at. If you want to look at who's had the best single season, I guess it's Mike Trout. Sure enough, Mike Trout twice. There's a lot you can look at here. And then there's here's where you can choose the different stats. This is just the dashboard, which is these kind of default stats. offensive stats, defensive, and WAR. But this is more traditional stats. You can go into batted ball outcomes, fly ball and ground ball rate, win probability, which is things like win probability has metrics like RE24 and what we talked about, and win probability added, different pitch type. You can see how does this batter do against. Let's look at who's done the best against.
Okay.
This is just pitch type. So who's seen like the most fastballs since 2006? You can go look at that. It's Jason Kendall in 2006. I'm guessing he was not very good that year. 74% fastballs. So you can go in and look at things like that. It gets pretty detailed. Plate discipline is things like percentage of swings in the zone, out of the zone. It gets pretty deep. You can look at a lot of different stats here. It goes all the way back to what's the first year they have? They have probably
1871.
1871, all the way back. Obviously, not all these stats. They don't have fastball percentage for 1871, but you can look at a lot of them, and they do have a lot of stats. They do calculate back, like WAR, for example. I believe goes back all the way, well, close to all the way. It's not quite as good for the older years, but you can still go in and look at it. There's really a lot to dig in here. You can change the minimum plate appearances. For pitchers, this will be innings pitched. You can set a minimum. There's really a wealth of things. And one more thing I want to point out, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can make a custom table. So this is basically every stat they have, almost every stat they have. You can scroll through this, and then just using this tool, you can choose the ones you want. And you could also choose the players you want to look at. And then, so let's say we want to look at, you can delete all these and look at, ground balls, fly balls, and line drives for David Ortiz and A-Rod. So you can just, choose your players. Create your custom table. Oh, maybe I have to do it twice. But anyway, you could go in and choose your players. You can choose your table, and it'll bring up just the stat. You can still have the years filter and all that. And so then you can get a very specific data that you want, these advanced stats, and then there's this export data button, which I'm not sure if we've used it, but I've used it. And all these CSVs we've used in the R section, they usually just come straight from Fangraphs. Make a custom table with whatever stats you want. Click this export data, and I'm not sure if this shows up for you guys, but it just downloads the CSV right to your computer. You can load it into Excel, you can load it into R, and you can really do a lot of analysis just from this Fangraphs.
Yeah, that's an extremely valuable tutorial there, Ethan. Thank you.
Yep. So Andy, you might want to talk about this one for a second. So somebody, Man Valdez, writes in the discussion forum, in what department or area of an MLB team does a person with a sabermetrics background or knowledge usually work? How is that department structured? What does it normally do? He's asking because he'd like to replicate a department like that for the Dominican Winter League. So basically, what do people with sabermetrics do for baseball teams?
Well, they usually work in baseball operations. Baseball operations is a sub-department of the general manager. The general manager runs player development, scouting, and baseball operations. Or each team has a different name for these things, but sometimes it's called analytics or research or performance. There's different names, but essentially whatever under the GM's hat, part of that is this section where they're doing analytics, like we've talked about here, advanced analytics that is not really the observational scouting analytics that you'd see for video scouts or for scouts that actually write up scouting reports on a different format for data collection. Then there's player development. It's a whole other department under the general manager that is concerned with the players in the minor leagues under that club and how they're going to get those players in the best position possible to make the major leagues. That's the whole purpose of player development. So it's one component of the general manager's job is to run the analytics department, and different teams do it different ways. There's a broad range of having a very high number of people on the staff for baseball operations doing, the analytics, to some teams just have one or two people. And then, of course, how much the GM and others actually implement recommendations from the analytics staff is a whole other question, whole other layer of things. But the way you'd structure it, I think, is to make it part of the GM's, responsibility to run the operations, and then, of course, you'd have a director of analytics, some title like that would be in charge of putting that all together, putting the right modeling and data gathering and decision-making tools so that you can help the general manager and other people make the right decisions.
All right. Ethan, do you see this question about the final exam?
By who? Sorry.
What?
John Rosenfelder.
Well, there's John and Bob asked questions at the final. So for Bob's question, will we get immediate feedback if an answer is correct? Yes, it'll be just like in the course. When you submit an answer, it'll tell you whether you're right or not. It's not like you submit all 50 questions on the final and then get a grade. You'll see how you're doing as you progress through it. Should we expect the final to be in similar length to a module? It's different because there's no lectures to break up the questions, so it's a little harder to tell. I don't think it's as long as a module. It's not.
Probably a little shorter. I would say, yeah. There's four tracks, four parts of the final, and probably each one is about equivalent to a track. Maybe a little shorter than a track.
Yeah.
That's about the length.
I don't think it'll be an overwhelming length for anybody, especially if somebody who's completed all 6 modules so far. I think you'll find the final fairly manageable. Will the final include loops and or functions in R? Yeah, the tech section of the final goes into R. That's of this class, so that's definitely covered in the final.
Yeah, make sure you feel good about your loops and your functions.
Yeah, you're going to have to know that for the final. There's a question in the discussion forum. I'm not going to go into it too much because it's a lot of baseball bar talk that we're not supposed to do. But what are your sabermetric-based predictions for major year-end awards? So I will go into a couple that I think are interesting. Sabermetric versus traditional thinking. The NL MVP is one that's interesting to me. Bryce Harper's been far and away the most valuable position player in the National League. It's really not close depending on whether you use WAR, WRC+, even OPS, anything like that. Harper's really dominating the league this year, but his team has been a major disappointment. So traditionally, somebody like him might not win the MVP because his team hasn't done well, his RBIs aren't that high. But sabermetrically, he should really be the runaway winner. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I would vote for Harper in the sabermetric type thinking. But I think it'll be interesting.
Who would be the traditional choice?
That's the thing. The NL kind of lacks a secondary traditional choice. So it would be somebody like Andrew McCutchen, I suppose.
Or could be could be Greinke.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They could
really a playoff team. Greinke is having obviously a great season. I think he'll probably win the Cy Young, although.
Right. So Greinke, yeah, that's another very interesting one. The NL Cy Young, sabermetrics versus not. Greinke has the ERA and the wins, 16-3, great winning percentage, which traditionally would lead to a Cy Young runaway. If this was 1970, Greinke would win the Cy Young unanimously. I'm fairly sure. But if you look at stats like FIP and defense independent pitching statistics, you really see that even if Greinke hasn't gotten lucky, he might be overperforming his peripherals. In a way, that's really not measure it with his true pitching talent. And pitchers like Clayton Kershaw and Jake Arrieta could be argued to be having a better season than Greinke if you look at the more sabermetric stats. So even though Greinke has the runaway in ERA and has a great record, it'll be interesting to see whether the voters are sabermetric in their voting or not, and how it plays out in a really three-way race between Arrieta, Kershaw, and Greinke. I think that's a really interesting race to watch because we've seen the devaluation of wins in Cy Young voting in recent years, and now we'll get to see if there's a devaluation in ERA and more of a focus on stats like FIP. So I think that's actually a really interesting race to watch if you're interested in the sabermetric side, to see where the general Baseball Writers Association that's voting, or the 28 voters or 30 voters that are voting on that award, how they lean this year, because there's just such a divide between whether you look at Greinke's year, whether you look at Kershaw's year. If you look on Fangraphs, Kershaw's having a great year, Greinke's having a good year. If you look the other side, it's the exact opposite. It's all about runs allowed versus FIP, or ERA versus defense independent. It's really interesting how they perform on the same team, Greinke and Kershaw, so differently using the two metrics. So I think that's a very interesting race to watch.
Here's another one, Correa versus Sano.
Yeah, that's a playing time one too.
Playing time, the city they're in. I think Minnesota might have a negative effect on Sano's ability to get votes around the country. But he's been terrific. So is Correa, obviously. So that should be one to watch too. And there's other great rookies around.
This really is the year of the rookies. So this will. If your favorite Rookie of the Year candidate doesn't win, that's because he came up in a year that's historic for rookies. The most WAR ever put up by rookies is this year. It's really kind of an amazing time for baseball to have this influx of young talent. So it's going to be fun to watch in the coming years.
Is Bryant the runaway for National League?
I think so.
I think he's a runaway.
Yeah.
I think so. We'll see, though.
Yeah, I think Bryant will run away with it. He has the pedigree. He has the numbers.
Played all year.
But that guy, the kid on the Pirates, Kang?
Yeah, it's pronounced Gang.
Gang. He's had a great year. Nobody really knew what to expect from him coming over.
Matt Duffy. Matt Duffy's the other one.
Yeah. And Herrera for the Phillies has had a great year. Hitting over 300. So it's the NL's crazy. And Francisco Lindor on the Indians. He hasn't been talked about nearly as much as Correa, and he's basically played as his equal so far. So,
yeah, Lindor is someone who's having I think everyone thought he'd be a good defender and a good hitter, but he's had power recently. He's been taking walks and hasn't just been empty batting average. He's having a really, really good year. Yeah. You look at. I was just looking at Fangraphs WAR. He's actually tied with Correa.
Yeah.
He's done a little bit worse on the offense, but better defensive statistics, which I think scouts would agree with. Lindor is really an excellent defender.
How many offensive runs does Sano have?
Sano has 14.7, which is fourth among rookies, even though he's only played in 56 games. So the only people ahead of him are Grichuk, who's not really a rookie, Gang, and Bryant. So on offense, so he's incredibly impressive at the plate.
Right. I'm sure if you get the WRC plus or something, I bet you his number.
Oh, WRC plus, he's the runaway right now.
Right.
Schwarber is second.
Who's second? Schwarber.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, the Rookie of the Year race is, I think it will be Bryant and I think it will be Correa, but any of these choices would be a valid choice, and all these players are going to be really good for a long time.
So AL Cy Young.
Keuchel, that would be my vote.
He's got the best beard by far, not even close.
Oh, if it was by the beard, you'd just go Keuchel and Arrieta, AL, NL, it's over. That's it.
That's definitely true.
I think Keuchel greater than sign Arrieta for the beard.
Right. But if you go one in each league.
Okay, yeah.
It would not,
What's Elvis is?
Is another interesting one for Sabres.
Because of Sale.
Because of Chris Sale, one thing he hasn't done is put up quite as many innings as Keuchel. But he does have an advantage in FIP, mostly because he strikes out a ridiculous number of batters. Keuchel's good, but not as amazing. He's more contact limiter and home run limiter. And obviously, he's done very well for himself in that. I think Keuchel will win it. I think that's definitely a reason. Or possibly Price. Price is right there. So it depends on how they finish. But I think if I was voting, I think Chris Sale will be right in there for me. It would depend on how they do over the last few weeks.
There still seems to be an effect, though, of playing for a winning team.
Yeah.
You know, it's so rare that the voters go against that. They kind of look at the playoff teams and they'll pick and choose from there.
And they'll go to somebody else if they can't find anybody they like on the winning teams. It's like a secondary resort, basically.
Yeah.
Nobody really cares about the manager of the year, or I don't know.
I definitely don't.
Who would that be?
Yeah, I think manager of the year is. I don't think anyone really knows what they're doing when they vote for manager of the year. And if anyone tells you that they do know what they're talking about, then they're lying to you.
Matt Williams. I predict that Matt Williams will not win. That's my only prediction.
I agree.
That's all.
I agree too. I think Ethan, you're the way you're speaking, this kind of like extremism. You're taking on some of my affect here, of like taking a big stand. That's good. I like that, Ethan. It's not your normal conservative, careful self.
And quickly, AL MVP. I think the numbers and the voters. It's becoming a runaway for Donaldson. He has a big lead over Trout and WAR now, starting to get significant. He plays on a much better team. He came over in a trade and really made that team a lot better in 1 year, which the voters seem to love. Sabermetrically, he's great on defense. His hitting is top 3, top 5 in the majors this year. He's been really great all around. I think it's going to be Donaldson. I don't think it's going to be close, and I don't have an argument with it. Except that I wish.
Yeah.
I wish Trout was healthy.
Well, I would say that it's not like Mike Trout is not having a good year. Mike Trout is currently 293, the 394 on base, 572 slugging. He's actually hitting a little bit better than Donaldson. If you look at WRC plus, he's a little bit higher there. Donaldson is obviously very good to elite defender at third, and Mike Trout, at least by the metrics, has been about average recently. So Donaldson's got a little bit of an edge, but I wouldn't count out Trout having a big September. He could make it interesting at the end.
I've watched Trout hit like 30 times in the last couple of weeks. I tried and watch his at-bats. He is not healthy. There's something wrong with Trout. His numbers are terrible in the second half. I think he has a hurt wrist or something. So I don't see Trout making a run for it. The Angels are terrible. They might not even push him down the stretch to play. So I think Donaldson runs away with it.
I think Donaldson doesn't win, but
I could look silly, but yeah.
For the record, in the past month, Mike Trout is hitting 257 with a 397 on base and 429 slugging, which is a 35% better than average. Which is not Troutian, but when that's his bad month, the guy's pretty good.
Sure.
You guys crashed. It looked like you might have crashed there. I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, I'm going to start calling. Yeah, I'm going to start calling. Anytime I talk to Ethan, I'm going to say Trout, $500 million man. So Ethan's got a thing for Mike. We love it.
Someday he'll prove it.
Very good, very good. So what else do we have? Other questions?
There's this question about Latin American scouting. We can do this one, and then maybe we'll finish up a little bit early.
Okay.
So this is asking about a clear pattern of successful teams having strong Latin American scouting departments. Astros, Cardinals, Pirates, Carlos Correa, for example. Yeah, what are our thoughts on this? Yeah, I think a lot of players obviously are coming out of Latin America, and it's pretty crazy how young these guys get signed these days. I mean, they get signed officially when they're 16. It's the youngest they can be signed out of Dominican and Venezuela, which are the two biggest countries, and other Latin American countries. But if they're getting signed at 16, that means these guys are getting scouted at 15 and even 14. And some of these guys have under the table deals done when they're 14 even, some of the top guys. So it's really hard, I would imagine, for these teams to scout it, but some teams do seem to be doing a really good job of picking out guys who are going to be successful major leaguers. I do think that if I were running a team, I would invest pretty heavily in that. On the other hand, some pretty successful teams haven't. I mean, the Tigers come to mind. Dave Dombrowski's Tigers have never really invested in the international market. I don't know if that's because of him. I don't know if it's because of ownership. I don't know, but it's not really something that they've done much of. And they've been, had a very successful team and had some good prospects. They've mostly traded some of them, but they've had decent farm systems at various points, and they've managed to develop good players and become a good team without it. So I think it's definitely a big advantage, but it's not necessary, at least at this point. Anything else you guys want to add?
I would agree. I think the idea that there's any part of your operation, scouting, player development, analytics, that you decide not to invest in is probably the wrong budgetary decision, I would say. I think there's enough evidence of the value of each of these different components of the team that, deciding, well, we're going to cut back on that or cut back on that is probably not too wise, especially given the revenue running around the game these days. So that's my view.
Yeah, I think it depends where it goes going forward. I think if an international draft ever makes its way into baseball, you'll see a difference in how teams scout in Latin America, especially. Right now, it's kind of a free-for-all. Definitely an interesting market to be in. So I think it'll definitely change in the coming years with a possible international draft, though.
All right, I think Annie's giving the signal that we should probably wrap up.
I'm sorry, I got interrupted here. Sorry about that.
But it's been a great summer with you guys, and thanks for listening to us in these almost hours.
And finish strong here. Get the work done, and you'll be pleased if you get it all finished. So good luck.
Yep.
Okay. Good luck, guys.
Good luck.